When you use the law of reversibility correctly, your reality will shift. When you pray, enter into your closet, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father, which is in secret. This law is of the highest importance because it enables you to foresee the inverse transformation of what you're manifesting in your world. Because if a physical fact can produce a psychological state, then a psychological state can produce a physical fact. So essentially, everything is interconvertible through the law of reversibility. So this proves that the law of assumption is real, the law of attraction works, okay? So a very good example of this would be, for a long time, people knew that friction could produce electricity, but they never knew that electricity could produce friction. So they're interconvertible. If a psychological state can produce a physical fact, then a physical fact can produce a psychological state, and otherwise, an interconvertible. So if you can create a feeling state of your world being perfect, where you have everything that you desire, and you can sustain that feeling state and not react to things and allow it to shift, that psychological state has to produce a physical fact in your world. Because if a physical fact can produce a psychological state, then a psychological state has to be able to produce a physical fact in your world. This is the foundation of the law of assumption, and assuming that you already have everything in your world, because that psychological state has to produce a physical fact. And I'll give you a really good example of this to really help you better understand the law of inverse transformation, the law of reversibility. For a long time, people knew that friction could produce electricity, but they never knew that electricity could actually produce friction. So it's the law of reversibility. If one can create the other one, that one can also create this one. So if you can create a feeling state of your wish fulfilled and sustain yourself in that psychological state has to produce that physical world to come to you. You are going to shift in the multiverse if you can hold on to that feeling. This is how you use the law of assumption, and the law of reversibility proves that. So if you knew how you would feel if you had if your manifestation was complete, if your desire was already completed, if you knew how that would feel, that's the psychological state. That's the psychological state that you hold on to, because a psychological state can produce a physical fact in your world, just like a physical fact can produce a psychological state. So if you have something great that happens to you, it changes your psychological behavior. Okay, that physical fact created a psychological state. So inversely, a psychological state can produce a physical fact. So if you can find the feeling of your desire being complete, then that psychological state has to reproduce that in your world. All you have to do is sustain that psychological state, and then you're attracting that to you. You're not seeking it. You're now attracting it, because the psychological state can produce a physical fact in your world. And this law was explained in the Bible over and over and over. He calleth things that be not as though they were, and the unseen becomes seen. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So if you can call a thing into existence that's not yet seen, but if you have faith in it, that's a psychological state, okay? You're creating a psychological state, and it's quoted throughout the Bible. The scripture symbolically is giving us these clues. It's telling us this is the form of creation. This is how to manifest portions of creation to come into your world. Because if you're walking down the street and someone gives you $10,000 or $100,000 in cash, it's going to create a psychological state. That physical fact is going to create a psychological state where you're feeling great. You're like, wow, someone just gave me $100,000. That's amazing. I feel incredible right now. That's a psychological state that a physical fact produced. So if a physical fact can produce that psychological state, then you can create that yourself. You can have faith in the unseen, and then that unseen has to become seen. So all you have to do is find the feeling of your wish fulfilled. And how do you do that? How do you do that? Ask yourself questions. How do I feel right now if my objectives were complete, my desires were complete, my life was perfect, I just won the lottery? Ask yourself these questions. How would I feel right now if I had $10 million You do this as you're falling asleep, creating this feeling state. And as we know, the inception point for the subconscious mind is right before you go to sleep at night. So that's when inverse transformation takes place. That's when the subconscious mind translates the psychological state into a physical fact. That's when it's created. But how do you create that? Ask yourself questions as you're going to sleep at night. How do I feel right now? Just contemplate, imagine. Imagination creates reality. Create the joyous feeling that the acceptance of the end, the feeling is the secret. Create this feeling. How do I feel? How do I feel right now that my objectives are complete? I'm in this relationship. I'm living in this new house. You know, I'm making this much money. I have this successful business. I just won the lottery. How does that feel to you? And that psychological state has to produce a physical fact in your world. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you can sustain that psychological state, it has to produce that physical fact, just like that physical fact would produce that psychological state if it actually happened to you. If you actually won the lottery, if you played the lottery or you did a scratch off and you won, that would ultimately create a psychological state within you. So inversely, the law of reversibility shows that psychological state can also produce that physical fact. If that physical fact can produce a psychological state, then it can do the same exact thing inversely. And even throughout the day, you can learn to sustain these feeling states, okay? By becoming a character, a version of you that already has everything that you want, and you play that out throughout the day. You don't talk about it. You just feel as if you've won the lottery. You feel as if you're in the perfect relationship. Your life, everything is going perfectly. Everything's going perfect in your life. Everything is lined up perfectly, even if it's not. You still feel this way because a psychological state has to create a physical fact in your world. So if you can sustain this, and you do this with little tricks, with little hacks throughout the day, knowing that everything that happens to you, whether it's contradictory to your psychological state, which is then pulling you back again if you allow it to, but you know that everything that's happening to you, whether it's positive or negative, it's leading you towards that physical fact that your psychological state is sustaining. You're sustaining a new psychological state, and you know that has to produce a physical fact if you can sustain that psychological state. So everything that happens to you, you know it's leading you towards that physical fact. It's leading you towards your wish fulfilled. It's leading you there. There's nothing bad that can happen to you. So you sustain this feeling and you don't talk about it, okay? You don't tell anyone what you're doing. You assume a state. You assume the psychological state, and then you stay in that state, and you know that everything that's happening to you is for your benefit. It's leading you towards your wish fulfilled, and you don't tell anyone else about it until you get there. Then you could tell people about it, but don't do it as you're moving it, but just pretend that you won $30 million, that you're a multimillionaire. Wake up and you act as if that's already happened to you, and you go about your day, you do everything just a little bit better and you're a little bit more positive, and you just have that psychological state. You don't have to tell anyone about it. You don't have to brag about it, be like, oh, I'm a millionaire now. You don't do that. You do that within yourself. That's all within you. You don't have to tell anyone about that. You must do this in secret, and your Father will reward you openly. And I'm going to put a sleep meditation card on the screen for you. So click on that, fall asleep to that. That's going to create this psychological state to produce a physical fact in your world as you're going to sleep at night.